Welcome to the Asian Supermarket. I'm your host Christina from America.
And I'm Carmen from Australia. Get ready for an inspiring episode this week as we chat with our Vietnamese Chicagoan friend Long, who shares his experience tackling Asian stereotypes, working as an elite personal trainer, as well as turning his passions and hobbies into his dream careers.
So grab your favorite protein shake as we chat with our guest in episode 9.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 9 of Asian Supermarket. This week we have a special guest with us. His name is Long and he's a Chicago-born Vietnamese. So his parents were actually Vietnamese refugees from the war and they immigrated over to Chicago, and he studied music management in the University of Pacific, and he's currently a personal trainer at Crunch Fitness.
Hello everyone, how's everyone doing?
So Christina, why don't you talk about how you guys know each other?
Yeah, so we were both in a nonprofit organization called Collaboration SF, and then we met from there and stayed in touch. So I've always been really inspired from his works. I see he's very involved in the Asian American community. So we're really glad to have you as a guest for our show. Alon, what is your favorite Vietnamese dish?
So fun fact about me is that my favorite dish is called bún riêu. It's actually something I particularly enjoy more than pho. It's a dish that is made out of crab. It's red, really savory, and most restaurants do serve it, but
another fun fact we learned about it is two of the main symbols known to the Vietnamese food culture is fish sauce and rice. And then the food varies by region from the south, the north, the central. So there's distinctive flavors from all of these regions. I also remember you talked about timestamps, right, in relation to food. I thought that was really neat. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
yes, in the food industry, there's always this talk about authenticity, right? But when Vietnamese people came over after the war, they had memories of their food, and so they tried to make it as close as possible to that. But there was no Vietnamese people going back and forth flying over there, right? And so there's a big time gap that Vietnamese people can go. And so when those doors opened again, the food has evolved to something else. Kind of like here, right? We evolved our food where we don't eat casseroles as much anymore. Even like trendy foods like remember the what was it, cronut? Remember that?
Yeah.
So stuff like that, right? Things evolve in certain regions,
Yeah.
and like Vietnam has the same thing. So there's certain foods that in America don't recognize if we were to go over there. One of the foods, I don't even know the name. I've seen it before. Imagine like a spring roll, kind of like opened and grilled, kind of like a quesadilla. And so they put an egg and mix like seafood on it, and it's just a different thing, and we don't even have that.
Wow, because I've had that before actually. They have that in the Vietnamese like restaurants where I'm at. So it's interesting that you guys don't really have that.
No, we have no.
Yeah. It must be that the immigrants from Vietnam here are more like newer immigrants compared to the immigrants over there. And why don't you talk more about yourself? So what do you do with work? I hear that you're a podcaster as well, and you're into fitness and writing. Can you let us know more about that?
So to kind of sum me up, they always say do not turn any hobby into a job because it becomes work, then you won't love it. And I've broken every rule, right? I've turned every single thing I love into monetary value. I graduated at UOP, University Pacific, private school, and I was in the music industry, so I did music management. I tried to, at that time, there was no streaming services yet, so it was really important to get your music on like SoundCloud, downloads and stuff like that. Like MySpace was a thing. It was really like important to get these artists on that. And there was always this like fear of like your music being stolen and stuff like that. So that was like a weird time. And then I moved to San Francisco, tried to get a head start of like tech. And then I was more into the tech industry of like the media stuff. I was part of this company called Revision 3. They got bought out by Discovery Channel like just 4 or 5 years ago. Mark Cuban invested in it and stuff like that. It was a very pinnacle point, a little bit before YouTube, of what we do now in podcasting and stuff like that. I was kind of there to see internet media can go. Company was trying to do what Netflix is now. I had to find more ways to make money. Instead of taking a 9 to 5, it's like, what else can I do? And I went to personal training. And so I did training when a time before Instagram, before like viral videos or like that too. So it was fun and it was tough. And I stuck it out long enough where I got opportunity to help build a fitness app with some key investors, and they're still good friends of mine. It was called Fitstar, and then eventually got bought out by Fitbit, and I got paid out some cash money. And so from there, I also decided to get involved in the community of like being Asian American, because my name is Long and like I can't hide who I am, right? And I think that's like a thing within the Asian community of most people that have American names, they can kind of hide and like submit. Not that they're hiding, but there's an invisibility you have that when you submit your resume. So my name Long being in front has always been kind of like an issue. Instead of running from it, I decided to like face it head on and like go into collaboration. So I did that in 2018, and like I know this is your show to interview me, but I kind of want to ask Christina like how you feel about 2018, because 2018 was like Black Panther, and then you had Crazy Rich Asians. It was just representation in your face, and so that's how I felt like came in. I was oh my god, like everything's like awesome and fun and drinks and like they're Asian people and we're all happy. Like how do you feel at that time?
You know, like usually in the Asian side, we always see like the richness, you know, those kind of sides. And then back in 2018, like Crazy Rich Asians, we see the positivity, right, of the Asian community, all that, API, talent rising, stuff like that. But I feel like there's so many like, you know, like recent things that happen. There's so many of the other side we haven't been able to see. There's a lot of things that haven't been exposed yet to media. We only see the bright side of things, I guess, because we're not the type to really talk about the bad, right? Like how we grow up, usually it's always like looking into success, trying to achieve hopes, dreams, you know, aspirations, right?
I think definitely it ties in with the Asian mentality of like not losing face and like kind of, you know, only looking at the good things and like showing, you know, putting your best foot forward. I think a lot of Asian people have that kind of mentality.
Yeah, like I know even with grandparents and stuff, usually when, you know, the younger generations report to them, they always say the good things. Like the parents are struggling here in America, but then they're always like, oh no, we're doing fine. You know, we're getting good income, sending money back home, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, and then like what was that movie with Aquafina? Farewell, right? Was it Farewell?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
So that one slowly started attacking like, okay, cool, we're Crazy Rich, but like interesting movie where like she's really American, but then she goes to another country and they're actually talking about like what does it mean to hide information, right? You know, I like the idea of like Eastern philosophy. They're like, you Westerners are so selfish, just like to dump all your feelings on us, right? That's your stuff. You need to be more cognizant about it. And I feel like as a writer, when I read a lot of works, they're from like, you know, Chinese writers, they're so precise with their words. And like whenever I read about them thinking about America, I was like, yeah, Americans just throw away words like no other. Like they call everyone their friends. How's everyone your friend? Or like, how did you say I love you to just someone you just knew for 2 months? It's like there's carelessness in their words in a way. And I feel like that's like the direction they were looking to, is just like, yeah, we're going to keep this from grandma. Like,
I was just wondering, you know, working in like personal training, creative blogging, all that, as like a, you know, Asian person, right? How has it been for you? Has there been like struggles going into the industry, or, you know, just like different things you can personally relate to that you can explain?
Yeah, personal training was tough in the beginning, right? I was the only like Asian trainer. And so Asian males, unless you're like Simu Liu or like Daniel Day Kim, you have your like chiseled like cheekbones, right? You can't work this out. Like I can get in there, I can like sleep and tape them together. Like, you know, there's things I can do. But if you're not Daniel Day Kim and like, and also I'm only 5'2", so like you have to be 6 foot, like rock hard abs, and then like cheekbone, all that, right? So if you're not that, then like you're invisible. Spent a lot of years like really being invisible. Interesting, even like in the fitness industry, I always kind of like abruptly say it's like in athletics, all athletic people, most of sports, everyone's African American, right? But then how's the fitness industry mainly white? And so there's no diversity there. So there was some struggles. Yeah. So the struggles were like, you know, I was the only Asian male. I would sometimes see an Asian woman, but like there's a lot of blonde, white guys, white girls. And then like luckily we had like at my gym personally, we had this African American woman from New York. She changed like Anita, shout outs to Anita, but she like changed everything, right? And so she like actually hired diverse people, and she like LGBT people. She actually had like like hired an LGBT like Hispanic Latinx person.
And what's the most asked question in the fitness industry?
Oh, it changes, right? So I remember before it was always like, what's the one workout I can do? What they meant was, what's one thing I can do so I don't have to do anymore, right? So it's like they try to get as most out of you. And it was, I think, because of the education at the time when I first started, like women were scared of lifting weights. They're like, so how much cardio can I do to just get skinny? And like,
Yeah.
now it's changed, right? So like women are lifting as weights as much as men. They're doing deadlifts and stuff like that too. And I think it changes and stuff. So you know what the one question I get all the time as a fitness person is? Can you hold the camera? I want to film myself. That's what. So it's changed. They're like, oh, can you hold this for me? And like, can you take a picture of me? That's the biggest question people ask.
Yeah. Is it for posture checking purposes though? When you lift, I know you have this a certain posture to it, right?
Yeah. And then I want to see how many likes my posture gets, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I was wondering because you say you're an elite personal trainer, right? So that means you must have some like more A-lister clientele, right?
For me, I think in the industry, when you're going to go into like more of the gym setting, they have brand names, and so mine is because based on the certification. So my 10 years experience, on top of that, like I have like NASM certification, I have TRX, I have rehab. Just like any other industry, you have to keep getting certified and stuff. And so that's where, like for me, like the years I put in, and so working with so many different people, like I know how to listen, I know how to talk. There's other communication skills, and then like Christina, like for you, like you work with people that teach, right? That's a whole different skill, right? Teaching, like you can do something amazing with your body, but how can you tell someone else to do it within an hour or the least amount of time and get them to replicate it? That's a whole different skill other than like training that like you can use in any other field, right? So that's what makes me quote unquote elite. Not better per se, but it's just like those are things you're going to get into when you buy something from me.
Can we talk more about like maybe your parents' role in your life, like with your careers and things? Have they been very supportive? Like growing up, were you exposed to a lot of your culture?
So my culture, so the interesting thing, I think my parents gave up of dictating how my life was going to be run. Of course, I went through all the like, so I was a really good C student. I just knew, I'm like basketball, right? Where you let your other players do the thing, and then it's like, okay, fourth quarter, all right, let's go, right? I'm that student, right? One of the biggest things, because I went to a predominantly African American high school, the African American kids got a different type of education than the white kids, and so they got the little bit more terrible teachers. I won't say terrible in the sense, but they just got less attention, right? And I was actually pushed that as a Southeast Asian person. And so I had to be cognizant of watching these things. I didn't do too well in school but then also I was kind of watching these like little nuances of how these things happen. And so my parents were just kind of upset of that I was like not doing too well, but then I also was learning how to like weasel around. So for example, I remember this one teacher, okay, kids, do not do this at home. Please do not. But for entertainment purposes, right? So I remember like there's this one thing I couldn't keep up with, right? It was like a writing journal for writing class, right? I was like, damn it, I couldn't get it. So what I did, I purposely turned in my math notebook on purpose. And so what she did was she's like, Long, you gave me your wrong notebook. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Can I turn it in tomorrow? Fine. So I was like, yes, I do sneaky stuff like that. Or like,
oh my gosh.
I remember my teacher's like inbox. So I like do it like within fifth period and then like turn it at the end of the day. And like they're like, Long, why'd you say my notebook? You said end of the day, right? They're like, Long, don't do that. But yes, fine. Like you're clever. So I just like be sneaky like that, which was like my friends always said like it's another form of like intelligence to be that sneaky and stuff. So I was just always doing stuff like that because I was watching white kids and like East Asian people get different experience. And I was like, fine, I'm gonna have to like look at it this way. But I didn't have that like understanding that was wrong I also didn't have the vocabulary because Vietnamese was not, it was only taught to me up to like when I was like 8 or 9, right? So just imagine, remember we talked about timestamps. My
Yeah.
Vietnamese is only by an 8-year-old. And so for me being high school, I didn't have the vocabulary to explain like, hey mom, like, systematic racism is like, I can't talk to my mom about like big issues. I didn't even know what the word systematic racism is when I was like in high school. So there's a lot of like friction between that, right? But like one of the things I do remember, my work ethic comes from like my mom. She did make she was contracted to make a lot of sewing work. So she made a lot of backpacks, she made a lot of like clothing and those things, and she's really good at it, but she would just spend hours and hours. So I'd help her do that. My dad helped run the business. And so I think from there I learned how to be sneaky. So it was like, all right, how do I maximize the amount of output with this work, right?
Yeah, that's definitely something that my mom taught me as well. She always said like work smart, don't work hard, work smart. And just that process of like doing things and optimizing yourself and finding the best way to do things. I think that's a great life skill to have.
Yeah, how did you feel even till now? Like how connected are you with your Asian culture?
It's good that we have like different generations. So it's like I just feel like there's Asian, but then there's Asian American, where I'm realizing being part of collaboration and talking to you women, it's like my experience is way different. So there's like two facets of me even trying to piece together certain things. Like for me, I grew up African American people, and like I've known their mannerisms and stuff. And like when I went to college, like there were predominantly white people, and then all the Asian people took the bio classes, right? They took all like the sciences, and like I drank with them. Don't get me wrong, but like even when it came to like actual interaction, like we were not studying together. I was in the business side, and there was like a handful of business people. But I heard Berkeley students, I didn't know that they were competitive, that they're I heard from one person, so don't get mad at me, Berkeley people. I just heard from one person, but I heard that they were like sabotaging each other's papers and stuff to get ahead, and they weren't even studying. That's a whole nother world. I never had that like competitiveness that way. My parents compared me to other kids, which is one like messed up thing, but I never had to like compete with someone else to get somewhere, right? So I never really saw other Asian people as competitors in like industries like fitness or music, because there's no other Asian people. But that's not how I think. So that's a whole layer of like I never had. So just on top of that, I like Vietnamese. Great examples, like my parents are afraid. I know they're afraid of flying. They keep saying left and right things. These will never tell me straight up like they're afraid of flying, right? Viet Tong Nguyen, he's a very prolific writer. He's a Vietnamese writer. He's from San Jose. And he writes about like how his dad was like, we are not American, we are Vietnamese. And then when he flew over there, he came back, okay, we are American, we're not Vietnamese anymore. That thing is all different. It just looks different. He's like, okay, never mind, right? So yeah, so even like Vietnamese people, it's like a struggle because we don't have this kind of like back and forth. We can always fly for certain people, and then as to like other like Taiwanese people have a more connection and stuff. So that is really more the complications where I fall.
Speaking of which, actually in the writing industry, right? Like how do you feel like the Asian presence is like in America within the writing industry?
There's a lot of things about like Asian writers where, because of the model minority, like a lot of these Asian writers that do get in there because they went to Yale, Harvard, and all those things too, right? And so there's a book called Crafting the Real World, and so a lot of writing is in the lens of white people, right? So for example, when let's just say a white character, like they walk in and put in their Miley Cyrus on the music, like they put on their Apple like speaker system, and then put on their Gucci handbag, right? So in a white lens, those things don't have to be explained. It's not like, oh, Miley Cyrus, the white like musician that's da 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 da. Now, if us three were just like to write our story of like, you went in and then like took off your shoes, and then like the white gaze is like, oh, explain why you have to take off your shoes. Whoa, and cultural, and then it just goes on and on. So a lot of white writing like looks at Asian people like that too, and so you do have like one person that prosper out. It's like, cool, we have that one Asian writer. Let's go back to other things. And so Asian writing tends to be looked at as like a genre itself. It's like, oh, you're just like Amy Tan, but then like we have fantasy, we have people that write historical fiction, we have these things, right? So that's what the complication is with POCs in the writing community itself. And also because the Asian people that can get into break in, like they have really high degrees and stuff, there's no mid tier type of writing, right? So there's no young adult, like, I mean, there are now, like, To All the Boys I Love, right? Yes. So there's like that, but there's no mid-brow, like I call it mid-brow, or just like fun, easy reading. Like we need more like Crazy Rich Asians, where it's just like not necessarily like really dense, but just like casual reading. There's no Harry Potter for Asian people of that sense of just like a fantasy. That's the part where we also need integration.
I think that's definitely like a huge point as well. Not even, I think just in the creative field in general, even in the music industry, you know, the film industry, I feel like with representation, when there's that like one person who's kind of cemented, I mean, not really cemented, but like the very first person who did it, people that come after kind of get compared to them, or they say like, oh, you know, like an example maybe in the film industry, like anyone who does like martial arts would be like, oh, you know, like it's like Jackie Chan, or like, you know, that it always gets tied back to the person before. Like even with now, like I know BTS is really famous, people always say like, oh, it's like Gangnam Style, you know, like there's no like, I feel like there's no, like people just always relate it back. And there's like people just think like, oh, Asian, you know, like I will just like tie them all in together in under this category.
Flipping the role, how do y'all feel about BTS?
I think that it's great. Like I'm all for like any kind of, you know, Asian representation. I see that a lot of people now are getting, you know, getting interested in Asian culture. I mean, like white people, you know, not even just white people, but like people of other cultures outside of Asia. They're really getting into, you know, getting to know more about, you know, Asian people, our culture, even though BTS is Korean, but I feel like they've really opened up, you know, a lot of things for just, you know, outside of Korea.
For me, I mean, I don't personally listen to K-pop, but I do like the concept. It is like what I'm doing with the dance world. They kind of integrate Korean pop music with its like hip hop movement, right? So then it comes to more of appreciation through a mainstream platform. And then, you know, if we did like, let's say Korean traditional like drum dancing and stuff, it's really slow. A lot of it's about like shamanism and stuff. Then it's very hard for us, not us, but, you know, like other cultures to have appreciation towards it. But through this kind of like fusion style, people can, you know, relate to it more. And then they see this other side, start learning like Korean, start learning more of their, you know, Korean technical dance skills, stuff like that. So I do like the integration, the fusion thing. And I do feel like that is something that's going to bring more diversity and unity through this world.
So as a personal share, we're touched upon this, right? Like me kind of just going through my Twitter feed and just seeing people post these men that do not look Western masculine, which is very interesting, right? The idea that they're not Daniel Dickens or seemingly like, are they wearing makeup or not? I'm not sure.
Yeah, they are.
So the idea like these men can wear makeup and like there's just, you know, what we consider in Western like feminine, right?
Yeah.
The way they dress is like not, you know, what we Western people is like, oh, they're not like shirts off, like cleavage, like the testicle cleavage, that's what the men call, you know, like cut arms and stuff like that too. Like their hair runs a little bit more like, different, and like that's fascinating to me. Of like 10 years ago, homophobic slurs would be slammed to them, like it was just like you know, exactly. And then like for me, it's just interesting. It's like, is this changing how even women see men? Do they have to be these like? I always joke like Marvel makes these movies. All they have to do is find one guy named Chris, a white guy named Chris, and they pay them like millions of dollars to get in shape, and they have their own movies. Like the only qualifier is if you're white and your name is Chris, like Chris Evans, I don't know the other, Hemsworth. That's the only qualification, right?
I wonder if that's a thing though, because maybe it's the fact that they, you know, a lot of people who are into BTS and K-pop and stuff can't really speak Korean, so they can't really, maybe they don't really used to like relying off the language and the songs, so they look a lot into like the mannerisms maybe of the person, the action. So maybe that's why they see more of a, you know, importance when, you know, the idols do these like, you know, whatever cutesy things, and they're like, wow.
Well, I heard, that because K-pop they control the image, right? I mean, we have that here. It's called PR and stuff like that too. I heard that like they're so big that they break conventions and then you still can gain more followers. Because one of my friends, she loves BTS. You should explain it to like they went on Instagram Live, they locked the door, they locked their manager out. They all got drunk and started being silly, and the manager's like, "Stop doing that! Stop doing that!" Like, whatever, we're BTS at this point, right? So like they can get away with stuff like that too. And so even something like that of like showing how human they are, like, but then they can still act cute of like doing the face things and stuff like that too. It's just again fascinating to me.
That's why I feel like this is the importance of entertainment, right? Like going back to the men looking fat, like more with female attributes, stuff like this, right? But people are totally fine with it. They idolize it, everything, right? Because with mainstream entertainment, people come to more of a eye-opening experience, and then they see it as a trend, and people are more open about, showcasing their true self, right? So yeah, like I feel like that is the positive side of entertainment. So hopefully, more people that work in the entertainment industry can bring out, like social causes or like religion or, like openness, like LGBT stuff like that, right? Because then everyone else that worships like these entertainers, they start having appreciation, understanding of it.
And I would like to hear more about personally, like the time in the music industry.
Like as an Asian American, so I when I got my degree in music business, it was the old school way. It was like signed to a music label, Warner Brothers or something like that. You get this album cycle. These are all the percentages that you get, right? Very old school type of thing. Once I stepped out, hey, internet's here. Forget what you learned. We're done, right? The one thing I will say that's more of like interesting when I think back now, I think because the exclusivity of the music industry, it's hard to break in. So there's kind of this like air around you of like, I made it, I did my thing. The Asian people I saw, they were too cool. It was just like the Asian manager that sat in the back. He would not talk to you. He'd be on his phone texting and stuff. He was just like not approachable, right? And I say that not to like as a bad thing, but I think looking back, it's like you made it, right? But you're not thinking about other people because it's so exhausting, right? To make it, especially because I was working in the more of rap and hip hop side and stuff like that too. And so you're trying so hard to, you face all these discriminations and things, but then eventually you make it. But there's always like Asian homie over there. He's like other side. He's like too cool. He has his drinks, and all that like the rappers talk to him like, "What's up?" and blah blah blah. But then you don't want to be like, "Hey, like I'm Asian too. What's up?" Like, and so there's this like weird kind of aura of like, it was just a weird aura that didn't make it very open and inviting. And so, but I did my thing. I did my blogging. I flew to New York a couple times. Like I remember, I think one of the funnest things was like Wale was becoming big. Like this is a musician, DJ / producer. His name is Mark Ronson. He did Amy Winehouse's album, and he was like propping up Wale to be the next best thing. And I remember like I flew in there. There was one very famous figure in the music like entertainment scene. Her name is Miss Info. She still has a radio show, and like she was known, but then also again she's like Asian, but especially at that time the conversation wasn't there to open up the doors for like other Asian entertainment. And I think collaboration just started, right? So that kind of bridge there. And so for me, I think I carry a lot of like empathy of like how hard it is to come up. And I keep that in mind of like always making sure like to reach out. And I think like Christina, I've talked to her a couple of times, like some ideas that I'm thinking about, and like hope like because the pandemic is hard, but I always keep my head thinking about these things and making sure like their voice is heard, or maybe they have something like that too, to keep those things going. And the space for that is like easier now than when I was coming up.
You
But
guys like actually like for our listeners and viewers, like can you talk more about collaboration? Because I think a lot of people probably, you know, around the, like our listeners probably won't really know what it is.
okay, so collaboration with the K, mind you, it's a their tagline is to empower other Asian Americans to get acclimated into the entertainment industry. So their bulk of their work was a lot of doing showcases of like these talent shows, these like similar to like SNL. It's like you have the format of like musicians, but also you can have like performers and had a DJ and stuff like that. Make these big events within the scope of what they had, right? And so some of the alumni was like Aquafina performed early on, like I mentioned, Miss Info. If you like a real hip hop head, she like helped out. Randall Park came for that alumni. And so from there, Clarity, yeah. So like this is not my generation, like the YouTube thing. Like that's what collaboration tries to do, and in an ongoing world that's changing. I know for me, I want collaboration to actually start recognizing like not that they aren't, it's just like these are a lot of these harder conversations about LGBT, binary, non-binary, people, working class. I mean, we're not categorizing like people that work the working class Asian people. Let's just say there's Asian people that just want to be stagehands, they want to be like cameramen, they want to be editors, right? You know, those are the things that like I hope to continue the conversation of not just the people in front, right? There can be one woman that wants to just do makeup for celebrities, right? Because I don't put on makeup, but you know, like you as women, like you have different needs for makeup than Western white people. Can you elaborate on that?
We actually had an episode that just got released on like makeup for Westerners versus you know the East and the West makeup look. You know, we won't reveal much about it because it was in our last episode, so people can tune in. But it is, we could say like one significant feature would be I would say in more Western countries, it's more darker for makeup, more sharper, whereas in for her specifically, she's in Korea. So for more Asian cultures, it's more of a natural, lighter look. So do you have any advice to give to those that want to work in either fitness, in music, in writing? Like, especially if they come from an Asian background, or you're saying like for fitness, right? If you don't have the looks they're looking for, right?
So this is kind of like words of life, right? So in my job, I tell people to do things, right? My job is to know all the bad stuff, right? Do not do this, do not do this, do not do this, right? So there's a lot of knows what not to do, right? I put that aside and just say, hey, lift up 300 pounds. I have to say like that, right? It's too scary, but like once they understand me, I can tell someone, all right, grip it this way, do it this way. Way to communicate this, right? They say lean in to your weirdness. Just like whatever you kind of like, just lean into it really hard, because no matter what industry you're going to get into, everything takes hard work. Talent only gets you so far, because I feel like sometimes talented people, they feel like they don't have to do certain hard work, and that's when they shoot themselves in the foot. What always makes you stand out when you lean into your weirdness, that's your uniqueness, that you have perspective. And I think especially in us Asian Americans, like when we're pitted Asian Americans, we always like think very linear of like, okay, what's Asian American I say that terribly, right? It's like what's in the Asian American thing that I like, that like could be my thing. But no, sometimes it can be really unique, where it's like I like keyboards. I like mechanical keyboards on a computer, and that's my thing. And if you dive into it and just love it, you'll learn the trade work of the work ethic, the research skills, and all these things no matter what. And so like you can develop all those skills and then bring it back to something. So then you become an actor or whatever. It's like, oh yeah, that one time I spent with like this community of keyboarding, which there is. I know nothing about it. I've heard about it once, but you can develop those skills. I think that's like kind of the thing that people get lost into, like worrying about what other people think.
I think it's so important as well to have something that you actually enjoy, whether it be like, your hobby or your career, but it's definitely important to have something that you are really passionate about, because then I feel like it gives meaning, more meaning to your life. Whereas if you don't really have something that's like driving you to improve yourself, or you know, an aspect that you really want to work on, that you're really interested in, I feel like it really helps you grow as a person, you know, when you do have something there that you really want to, you know, that you're really passionate about.
Thank you everybody for joining in today, and thank you so much, Lon, for all your tips and words of advice.
Yeah, thank you. It was really great talking to you and getting to know more about you.
Appreciate it.
Stay tuned next week for a very interesting and culturally diverse 10th episode with our friend Tiffany, who's a Korean born in Paraguay and spent her childhood between there and the US. See you next week.